6 women stood in a perfect line across the marble floor of the Moretti mansion. Each one wore a dark coat. Each one held a leather folder. Each one kept her back straight in the way women do when they know the person across the room has more money than they will ever see. Lucas Moretti looked at them the way he looked at everything lately, without feeling. It was the 8th interview in 3 months. Behind him, on the long velvet sofa, a small girl sat with her knees pulled up to her chest. Emma was 6 years old. In her arms she held a stuffed fox with a crooked ear. The fox was the last thing Isabella had given her. Emma had not let go of it in 91 days. She had not spoken in 91 days either. Marco stepped close behind Lucas's shoulder, voice low. "Sir, Adrian took 2 more warehouses in Queens last night. He is moving on us while we are quiet." Lucas's jaw tightened. The knuckles on his right hand went white. Every week since the accident, Adrian Kovac had taken something. A dock, a restaurant, a loyal man's life. The Moretti empire was being eaten alive, and Lucas could not bring himself to care the way he used to, because the thing he had really lost was not in a warehouse. 3 months ago, Isabella's car had gone off a bridge outside the city. Divers searched for 4 days. They found the car. They found her coat. They never found her body. And Emma, who had been waiting at the window for her mother to come home that night, simply stopped talking. "Emma," Lucas said now, turning toward the sofa. His voice was softer than most of his men had ever heard it. "These women are here to take care of you. Pick one." Emma did not move. "Mrs. Halloway, the agency director, gave a practiced smile. "Emma, this is Miss Bennett. She used to care for the Ashford twins in Boston." Miss Bennett knelt halfway down. "Hello, sweetheart. I heard you love horses." Emma looked at her with eyes so empty it made the woman straighten again. "Miss Porter has been with the Vance family for 9 years. Miss Lowell speaks 3 languages. Miss Caldwell graduated top of her class at Yale." Each woman stepped forward, said her soft hello, and stepped back when Emma's gaze slid past her as if she were made of glass. Lucas rubbed his temple. He was a man who had broken others twice his size with a single phone call. He could not make his own daughter look up. "Emma," he said again, and this time his voice almost cracked. "Baby, you have to choose." Emma finally turned her face toward him. She shook her head once, slowly. "No." It was the only word she had spoken in 3 months, and it was the word no. Mrs. Halloway opened her mouth, but at that moment Sophia stepped quietly into the room with a tablet in her hands. Lucas's assistant. Young, efficient, quietly in love with a man who had never looked at her twice. "Sir, the last candidate just arrived. She was delayed on the train. Send her home. We are done here. She is already at the door." Before he could answer, the deep chime of the front bell rang through the hall. It was a sound Emma had heard 100 times without reacting. But this time she reacted. Her head lifted, slowly, like a flower turning toward a light it had not known was there. Her small fingers loosened around the fox. For the first time in 91 days, something moved behind her eyes. Lucas saw it. Marco saw it. Sophia, across the room, froze with the tablet half lowered. No one spoke. The chime was still fading in the air when Emma, without a word, slid off the sofa and took one small step toward the front door. Toward a woman none of them had met yet. The door opened before Henry, the old butler, could reach it. A woman stepped inside, bringing with her the cold air of the New York winter. She wore a gray wool coat that had seen better years, and carried a single worn leather folder pressed against her chest. Her hair was dark, tied back simply. Nothing about her said she belonged in a house like this. "I am sorry I am late," she said quietly. "The train stopped twice. I ran from Grand Central." Her cheeks were pink from the cold. She did not look at the chandelier, or the marble floor, or the 6 women staring at her. She looked at the small girl already walking toward her. Marco stepped forward and took the folder from her hand. He flipped it open. 3 pages. No agency seal. No ribbon of recommendation letters. "Claire Whitman," Marco read. "Preschool teacher, 8 years. Brooklyn Early Learning Center. No private placements. No certifications beyond basic CPR." Miss Porter made a small sound behind her hand. "A kindergarten teacher. In this house." Miss Bennett smiled thinly. "I did not realize the agency sent charity cases today." Claire heard them. She did not turn. Her eyes stayed on the child. Lucas watched her carefully. Many women had walked into this room over the last 3 months. Some were too eager, some too polished. This one looked at Emma like she already knew her. "Miss Whitman," he said coldly. "The interviews are complete. Leave your information with Sophia on the way out." Claire opened her mouth to answer. She did not get the chance. Emma crossed the last of the distance between the sofa and the doorway. She stopped one step in front of Claire. Then, without hesitation, without a single glance at her father, she reached up and took the woman's hand in her own small fingers. The room went silent in a way Lucas had not heard since the morning of the accident. Miss Porter's mouth fell open. Mrs. Halloway lowered her clipboard. Sophia pressed one hand to her chest. Marco slowly closed the folder and looked up. For 3 months, Emma had not let anyone touch her except her father and Henry. She had flinched from doctors. She had pulled away from grandmothers. She had not hugged the priest at the funeral. Now she was holding a stranger's hand. Claire knelt slowly, the way a person kneels in a church. She did not speak first. Emma did. Her voice came out thin, rough from long silence, barely more than breath. "You are the one Mommy said would come." A chill moved through Lucas that had nothing to do with the open front door. He took one step forward. "What did you say, Emma?" Emma did not look at him. She was looking at Claire, searching her face the way a child searches for the last piece of a picture. Mommy said. "At night, she said the one who comes will be named Claire." Lucas's gaze snapped to the woman kneeling on his floor. "What is your first name, Miss Whitman?" Claire swallowed. When she spoke, her voice did not shake, but something in her eyes did. "Claire, sir." The silence that followed had teeth. Marco's hand drifted, almost automatically, toward the inside of his jacket. Lucas raised 2 fingers. Marco stopped. Lucas studied her. A train-delayed preschool teacher in wet boots. No letters, no polish. And somehow, a name his dying wife had whispered into their daughter's ear. Mrs. Halloway cleared her throat. "Mr. Moretti, I can assure you." "Get out," Lucas said. He did not raise his voice. The 6 women, the clipboards, the folders, all of it moved toward the door within 30 seconds. When the hall was empty, Lucas turned back to Claire, who was still kneeling beside Emma. "You start tonight. Henry will show you to the East Wing." "Thank you, sir." "Do not thank me yet." He waited until she lifted her eyes. He wanted her to see his face when he said the next part. "You and I are going to have a very long conversation, Miss Whitman. Not tonight, when I am ready. And until then, you will not take one step in this house that my men do not know about." He walked past her toward the staircase. Emma, still holding Claire's hand, watched him go. In Lucas's head, only one sentence repeated itself, sharp as a blade. "I am going to find out exactly who you are." 3 months earlier, the small apartment above a bakery on Hicks Street smelled of sugar and fear. Isabella Moretti knelt on the hardwood floor, folding a child's sweater into a duffel bag with hands that would not stop shaking. Her long dark hair was pulled back into a loose braid, and she wore no jewelry, no ring, no pearls, nothing that could identify the wife of Lucas Moretti. Claire Whitman sat across from her on the floor, taping a cardboard box shut. They had known each other for 20 years. They had met in the same room at Street, Agnes Orphanage in Albany when they were 8 years old, 2 frightened girls who shared a bunk bed and a single stuffed rabbit between them. The bond they built in that place had never broken. "I still think there has to be another way," Claire said quietly. Isabella did not look up. "There is not. Bella, he loves you. That is exactly why I have to do this." She finally lifted her eyes, and Claire felt her chest go tight. Isabella's face was thinner than it had been a month ago. There were shadows under her eyes that had not been there before. "The FBI is opening a file on him," Isabella said. "I heard 2 agents talking in a cafe on Mulberry Street last week. They did not know who I was. They were talking about indictments, wiretaps, a witness list. Claire, they are going to put him away. When they do, the families will tear each other apart to take his territory, and I will not raise Emma in the middle of that war." Claire set the tape gun down. "There is more," Isabella continued. "Adrian Kovac has been meeting with people he should not be meeting with. He is building something. I do not know what, but I know the shape of it. He is getting ready to move on Lucas. Soon. And when that starts, Emma and I become leverage. You understand? A bullet in the head would be mercy compared to what they would do to us to break him. Then tell Lucas. Warn him. I have tried." Isabella's voice cracked. "He cannot hear me. He thinks his name protects us. He thinks his men are loyal enough. He does not understand that Adrian is not like the other bosses. Adrian smiles while he buries you." Claire was quiet for a long moment. "So what do we do?" Isabella reached into the duffel bag and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. An accident report. A bridge on the Hudson Parkway. A single car crash. Next Tuesday, at 9 at night, my car goes off this bridge, Isabella said. I have already paid the man who will make sure the car is found, and I am not. They will drag the river for 4 days. They will give up. Bella. 3 months after the funeral, Lucas will hire a nanny. Not the first 5. Not the second. He will keep refusing them because Emma will refuse them. I have been preparing her. Claire went still. Preparing her how? Isabella's eyes filled, but no tears fell. She had cried them all out already, somewhere in the last few weeks. Every night, she whispered, when I put Emma to bed, I tell her a story about a woman named Claire. I tell her that if Mommy ever has to go away, a kind woman named Claire will come, and she is the only one to trust. I have been saying it for 6 weeks, Claire, every single night, until it lives in her bones. Claire pressed both hands over her mouth. You come to the house, Isabella said. Plain clothes, worn folder, no polish. Emma will know you. Lucas will have no reason to suspect. 3, maybe 4 months in, you take her for a walk, a doctor's appointment, something ordinary, and you bring her to me. And then, Canada, a small town, a new last name. Emma grows up somewhere quiet. Claire lowered her hands. Her voice was barely audible. And Lucas? Isabella closed her eyes. He lives, safer without us. That is the only gift I can give him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Isabella crawled across the floor and wrapped both arms around Claire's shoulders, the way she had done when they were 8 years old and the lights went out at Street Agnes. I do not know if someone else is watching me, Isabella whispered against Claire's hair. Sometimes I feel it. In the market, on the subway. A shadow that does not belong to Adrian and does not belong to Lucas. I cannot see his face, but he is there. Claire held her tighter. Who? I do not know. Isabella's voice was smaller now, almost a child's voice again. But you are the only person in the world I trust, Claire. Promise me, whatever happens. Emma. Claire closed her eyes against the wall. I promise. The Moretti estate sat on 12 acres behind a wrought iron gate in Greenwich, 2 hours north of the Brooklyn apartment Claire had left behind that morning. She noticed the cameras first, 4 at the gate alone, 2 more tracking her car down the long gravel drive. When the driver stopped at the front steps, a man in a black suit opened her door before she touched the handle. He did not smile. He did not introduce himself. He simply took her suitcase and walked. Inside, Henry was waiting in the front hall. The old butler was the only person in the house who looked at her without calculating something. He bowed his head a quarter inch. Miss Whitman, Mr. Moretti asked me to show you the East Wing. Miss Emma is with her tutor until 4. He led her down a corridor lined with paintings Claire did not recognize and would not have dared to touch. At the end, 2 more men in dark suits stood at a crossroads of hallways. They nodded at Henry. Their eyes followed her. Are there always this many men in the house? Claire asked quietly. Henry's pause was the answer. More this week than last, miss. Her room was large, pale blue, with a single window overlooking a winter garden. A narrow door connected it to Emma's bedroom. That had been Isabella's request, Claire knew, even though no one here would ever say her name aloud. She had just set her suitcase on the bed when raised voices reached her from somewhere below. She did not mean to hear. The vent in the corner of her closet carried sound from the study beneath her room. She stepped toward it without thinking. The restaurant in Little Italy, sir. Kovac's men, 8 of them. 3 of ours are in the hospital. Gino took 2 bullets in the leg. Marco's voice. Tight. Reporting. Then a second voice. Lower. Colder. A voice Claire had heard only once, hours ago, in a marble hall. He thinks I am on my knees. The sound of a fist striking a desk made the bones in Claire's hand jump. Call every capo. 9 tonight. My study. No excuses. Anyone who does not come chooses Kovac and I will treat him accordingly. Sir. And Marco. Double the men on the East Wing. Already done, sir. The conversation ended. Claire stepped back from the vent as if it had burned her. She sat slowly on the edge of the bed and pressed her palms flat against her knees to stop them trembling. Isabella had been right. A war was already burning around this house. She had only walked into the smoke. The kitchen, at least, was warm. Mrs. Eleanor Dunn, the cook, was 65 years old, had arms like a baker, and studied Claire the way a woman studies fruit at the market. You do not look like the others, Mrs. Eleanor said. No, ma'am. Good. The others bored the child. Sophia appeared in the doorway at that moment with a clipboard, introduced herself in a voice too polite to be friendly, and vanished again. Claire noticed the way Sophia's eyes had lingered on the staircase leading to the study. The way a woman looks when she is counting footsteps she will never hear coming. Emma came into the dining room at 6 with her stuffed fox tucked under one arm. She sat in her chair. She picked up her fork without being told. She ate her roasted chicken, all of her carrots, and most of her bread. Mrs. Eleanor stopped stirring the pot on the stove and stared. Henry, standing near the door, closed his eyes for a brief moment. No one commented. They all knew that commenting on a small miracle was the fastest way to break it. At bedtime, Claire sat on the edge of Emma's mattress. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp shaped like a moon. "Miss Claire," Emma whispered. "Yes, baby. Sing the one about the boat." Claire's throat closed. It was the song Isabella had sung to the two of them in the orphanage, and later to her daughter in this very room. Isabella had taught it to Claire when they were 9. She sang it now, softly, and halfway through the second verse, Emma's eyes closed. Later, Claire stood at the window of her own room, unable to sleep. Beyond the glass, the winter garden was silver under the moon. A man stood in the middle of it, alone, the red coal of a cigarette burning between his fingers, a phone pressed to his ear. His voice drifted up, thin through the cold air. "I do not care what it costs. I do not care how many. Adrian is going to pay for every single one." Lucas Moretti lifted his face toward the house, and for 1/2 second Claire could have sworn he looked straight at her window. She did not breathe until he turned away. Bellini's sat on the corner of Mulberry and Grand, a family restaurant that had not served a real customer at lunch in 30 years. The doors were locked, the blinds were drawn, and the only patrons were men who never carried menus. Lucas stepped out of the black SUV at 11, Marco half a step behind him. The sidewalk had been cleared of anyone who did not belong. Inside, Adrian Kovac was already seated at the middle table. He was 40, broad in the shoulders, immaculate in a charcoal suit, Croatian by blood, Brooklyn by making. His hair was cut short and his smile never reached his eyes. He stood as Lucas entered and spread his hands. "Lucas, thank you for coming. You chose the place." Neutral ground. Lucas sat. He did not take off his coat. Marco stood 4 feet behind his chair. "I will not waste your time," Adrian said. "The city is bleeding. I am here to offer a way to stop it. Give me the Brooklyn docks. Give me 30% of the casino on Long Island. Tonight, every warehouse I have taken goes back to you. Peace by sundown." Lucas looked at him a long moment. Then he laughed, a dry sound without humor. "My father built those docks, with his hands, with blood still in the concrete. And you sit in a restaurant my grandfather opened and ask me to hand you his grave?" Adrian did not blink. "I ask you to be practical. You have a daughter, a quiet house, a lot to protect." The temperature in the room dropped. "Do not speak about my daughter." Adrian took a slow sip of wine. "I will not," he said softly. "But I will speak about your wife." Lucas went still. "Beautiful Isabella, dying alone in the cold river. During the exact weeks your empire began to shake. A strange season for a wife to lose her way on a bridge. Do you ever wonder, Lucas, if the road was really wet that night?" Marco caught Lucas's shoulder half a second before Lucas came across the table. "Sir," Marco said in his ear, low, fierce. Not his ground. "Sir." Lucas's chest rose and fell. "Say her name again," he said quietly, "and you will not finish the sentence." Adrian smiled small and satisfied. He had seen the wound. Lucas stood and buttoned his coat. "You will have my answer," he said, "in a way you will understand." He walked out without touching the wine. The drive back to Greenwich was silent for 15 minutes. Then Lucas spoke. He did not turn his head. "Marco, the truth. Did Adrian kill her?" Marco was quiet, watching the highway. "I do not have proof, sir, but I have pieces. The bridge was in territory Kovac had just started buying. 2 of his men were seen in the area that week, and he moved on us the day after her funeral, which is the move of a man who knows his rival is grieving." Lucas closed his eyes. "So you think it was him?" "I think the shape of it fits him, sir." Back at the house, Lucas walked past Henry without a word. He went up the stairs, down the east hallway, and opened Emma's door. His daughter was drawing at her little desk. He knelt beside her, did not touch her, and looked at her for a full minute. Then he stood and turned to Marco in the doorway. "Double the men on the grounds. Triple them on the east wing. Emma does not leave this house. Not for school, not for air, not for anything." "Understood, sir." Claire was standing in the doorway of her own room, 2 steps behind Marco. She had not meant to listen. She had come to ask if Emma wanted lunch upstairs. She had heard every word of the drive. Her back was flat against the wall and her hands were cold. Lucas believed Adrian had killed Isabella, which meant that the moment she opened her mouth and spoke the truth, Isabella is alive. She planned all of this. I am her best friend. She would not be confessing a secret. She would be tearing down the one thing holding a grieving man together, and she had no idea yet how much worse that truth was going to get. The knock came at 11 minutes past midnight. Claire was still awake. She had been awake since she heard Lucas come back up the stairs 2 hours earlier, moving the way a man moves when he has been drinking alone without drinking enough. Henry stood in her doorway, his face carefully blank. "Mr. Moretti is asking for you, miss." In the study, Claire pulled a cardigan over her nightgown and slipped her feet into flat shoes. On the way down the hall, she glanced at Emma's door. Closed. The small glow under it from the moon-shaped lamp. Safe, for now. The study was on the first floor at the end of the west corridor. 2 dark-suited men stood on either side of the door. They parted without a word as she approached. Henry knocked once for her and stepped away. "Come in." She went in. Lucas was at his desk with a single green-shaded lamp burning. A crystal glass sat half-empty near his right hand. He had taken off his jacket. His white shirt was open at the collar. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, like a man and not a figure carved out of granite. "Sit, Miss Whitman." She sat. He did not offer her anything. He did not look at her. He turned a small object over in his fingers. A silver cufflink. His wife's initial on it, Claire realized. I.M. He had not worn it in weeks, and he was turning it now as if he had forgotten it was there. When he finally spoke, it was without lifting his eyes from the cufflink. "Did you know my wife, Miss Whitman?" Claire's heart slammed once, so hard she felt the pulse in her wrists. She had prepared for this question for weeks. She had practiced the answer in a Brooklyn mirror. She gave the version she and Isabella had built together. "I met her once, sir. Years ago. At the Central Library in Chicago. I was a graduate student then. She was there for a book signing her university was hosting. We spoke for maybe 5 minutes. What did you speak about? Fairy tales." She was researching the ones that originally ended badly. It was the truest lie Claire had ever told. Isabella had loved those stories, but the meeting in Chicago had never happened. Lucas lifted his eyes. The look he gave her did not belong in a house. It belonged in an interrogation room with a single bulb and a long night. It measured her shoulder blades, her pupils, the movement of her throat when she swallowed, the rate at which she blinked. Claire did not look away. She had promised Isabella. 1,000 times over, in her head, on the train, in the wet slush on the steps of this mansion, she had promised. "Do you know who Adrian Kovac is, Miss Whitman?" "I have heard the name in your house, sir. That is all." "Then let me be clear so you do not misunderstand your position." He leaned forward and set the cufflink down between them. "Adrian Kovac is a man who I have reason to believe killed my wife. He is attacking my family, my business, and my name every single day I sit here breathing. If I find out that you have ever spoken to him, taken his money, answered a message from one of his people, or so much as walked past him on a sidewalk without crossing the street, you will not have the luxury of being fired. Do you understand me?" "I understand." "Good. If you only knew," Claire thought, and the thought was so sharp and so shameful that she had to close her hand into a fist under the desk to stop it from shaking. "If you knew the truth tonight, would you even let me walk out of this room?" Lucas leaned back. The boss dropped 1/2 inch, and something quieter took its place. "Emma," he said, "in 3 months she has not looked at another human being except me and Henry and her mother in a photograph. And she looked at you before you crossed the threshold. Tell me why." Claire thought for a long moment. The answer she gave him was not a lie, even if it was not the whole truth. Children can feel who is going to stay, sir, before anyone else can. Lucas studied her again, this time for longer. This time the silence was not an interrogation. It was a man trying to decide what to do with a piece of a puzzle that did not fit any of the holes in front of him. Finally he nodded, just once. "You may go, Miss Whitman." Claire stood. Her legs held. She reached the door. "Miss Whitman." She stopped. "Sleep well." She closed the door behind her. In the study, Lucas picked up his phone without moving from the desk. Marco. Every phone call she makes. Every message she sends. Every stamp she buys. I want to see it before she does. The call came at 4 a.m. Claire heard it through the old bones of the house, the way one hears a siren before one sees the light. A door slammed, footsteps running on hardwood, then a car engine, then another. By the time she looked at her window, 3 black SUVs were already cutting through the gravel of the drive, headlights sweeping across the garden. She reached for her phone out of habit. The news was already there. Massive fire at Newark warehouse. Cause unknown. Estimated losses in the tens of millions. The warehouse belonged to a shipping subsidiary listed under a company Claire did not recognize, but she had been in Isabella's apartment long enough to know how the names worked. A holding company inside a holding company, inside a name that meant Moretti. It was the largest storage facility the family owned on the East Coast. By sunrise, it was ash. Lucas did not come home that morning. At noon, Marco walked through the front door with a bandage on his right hand and black soot still clinging to the cuff of his shirt. Sophia met him in the hall with fresh coffee and questions. He took the coffee and ignored the questions. 20 million in inventory. That was the number Claire heard him murmur into his phone as he passed her on the stairs. 20 million. Gone in a single night. The emergency council of the family met in the dining room at 3 in the afternoon. 7 men, all past 50, all heads of different branches of the Moretti operation. They came in wool coats that smelled of cigars and street. The long table was cleared. Sophia brought whiskey and left. The doors closed. Claire was in the hallway upstairs with Emma, reading a picture book aloud about a rabbit who had lost his way home. She kept her voice soft, but her ears were tuned to the sound below. Vincent spoke first. He was 71 years old, the oldest capo in the room, and he had served Lucas's father before Lucas was born. His voice was rough the way old stone is rough. Lucas, I have loved your family since I was a boy. I loved your father. I stood in the rain at his funeral. So I am going to say to you what only an old man has the right to say. A pause. Since we buried Isabella, you have not been the boss of this family. You have been a grieving husband wearing your father's ring. Adrian Kovac looked at you across a table yesterday and made a joke about your wife, and you walked out alive. Your father would have made that joke cost Kovac his tongue. Someone else cleared his throat in a way that meant agreement. 20 million burned last night, Lucas, Vincent continued. The next fire will be a restaurant with people inside it. The one after that will be in this driveway. If we do not finish Adrian inside the month, we do not finish him at all. And when we do not, men at this table are going to start taking meetings with him. I am telling you this as a friend, because I would rather die in your father's name than in a stranger's. Claire did not hear Lucas's reply. She only heard the silence after it. The silence of a man accepting a truth he had been trying to outrun for 93 days. When the meeting ended, the 7 men walked out in single file. None of them made eye contact with her on the stairs. Lucas did not leave the dining room for a long time. Somewhere in the world, in a house Claire could not see, a man was watching the news. Ethan Vance sat in front of a flat screen in a rented lake cabin outside Albany, drinking black coffee and smiling for the first time in weeks. The anchor was reading numbers. Moretti holdings. Moretti losses. Moretti silence. On a second monitor, a small square of grainy footage showed a woman sitting on the edge of a bed in a locked room, her dark hair pulled back, her face thinner than it had been months ago. Isabella Moretti lifted her eyes toward the camera as if she could feel him watching. Ethan raised his coffee cup toward the screen. He does not have time for you anymore, Bella, he said softly. That is the beautiful part. In the east wing, Claire closed Emma's bedroom door and slipped into her own room. Her hand shook as she pulled an unopened box of hairpins from the bottom of her suitcase. Inside, folded small enough to sit under the last pin, was a strip of paper that had arrived sewn into the hem of a grocery delivery bag 2 days ago. She had nearly missed it. The code was one she and Isgul had invented when they were 14. Sunday, 3 o'clock. The bench under the arch where the pigeons gather. Bring her. Claire stared at it for a long time. Then she looked up, through her window, into the garden, where 4 new armed men now stood at stations that had been empty the day before. Claire waited 2 days. She waited for the house to settle back into a rhythm after the Newark fire. She waited for the second shift of guards to rotate into their positions so she could memorize their faces. She waited for Lucas to spend a full afternoon locked in his study with Marco and 6 silent men, because a man in that kind of meeting had no attention left over for a child. Then, on Sunday morning, she went to find him. He looked up from his desk with dark half-circles under his eyes. I need to take Emma into the city today, sir. No, there is a child psychologist on the Upper East Side, Dr. Ruth Feinberg. She specializes in selective mutism in children after loss. I called her from the house phone, which I know your men monitor. Her office confirmed the appointment at 3 o'clock. If we do not start now, Emma may not speak again for a year. Lucas set down the pen he had been holding. Emma spoke to you. She spoke 4 words to me in a week, sir. A child her age should be saying 40,000. Please. He watched her for a long moment. Then he looked past her, at the framed drawing of a stick figure family taped to the window by his desk. Mama, Daddy, Emma. Drawn in crayon, months ago, when there was still a mama to draw. Dominic goes with you, he said. He does not leave your side, not for a bathroom, not for a drink of water. Clear? Clear, sir. Dominic was 45, built like a fence post, and did not make small talk. He sat in the front passenger seat of the town car, while the driver navigated Manhattan traffic. Claire sat in the back with Emma, who wore a small pink coat and held the stuffed fox against her ribs. At 1:45, Claire tapped the driver's shoulder. Emma wants to stop at the bookstore on Madison first. Dr. Feinberg asked us to bring a book the child feels safe with. The driver glanced at Dominic. Dominic nodded once. They stopped at Albertine, a small French bookshop with narrow aisles and a ceiling painted like a night sky. Claire knew the shop. 2 floors, 2 staircases, 1 door at the front, 1 door to a service alley in the back. She steered Emma to the 2nd floor. Dominic followed at 5 paces. Claire pulled a picture book from the shelf. Baby, sit and look at this one. I need to find a 2nd book near the window. Mr. Dominic, will you stay with her? She trusts you. It was a small compliment, and Dominic was a man who did not hear many. He took the chair next to Emma. Claire walked toward the children's window display, past it, to the service staircase, down 2 flights, and out the back door into the alley. She did not run. Running draws eyes. She walked fast, keeping a long scarf across the lower half of her face, and circled the block to where a yellow cab was already waiting, meter off, because she had called it from a burner phone the night before. By the time Dominic looked up from the children's floor, Claire was back at the front door. She had been gone less than 90 seconds, long enough to tell the driver of the cab an address, long enough to seal a 2nd plan. Ready, Mr. Dominic? She has her book. He squinted at her. You were sweating a little. The heat upstairs, sir. At 3 o'clock sharp, the town car stopped at Dr. Feinberg's office on East 72nd. Claire carried Emma inside, spoke to the receptionist, signed a form, and then told Dominic the doctor required a parent interview without the bodyguard present. Dominic argued. The receptionist, briefed by a separate phone call that morning, held her ground with the calm of a woman who worked with families whose names were in newspapers. Claire took Emma out a side door that opened onto 3rd Avenue. The cab was already there. Central Park. Bethesda Terrace, lower level. Emma climbed into the back seat, small and quiet, and held tighter to the fox. Miss Claire. Yes, baby. Are we going to see Mommy? Really? Claire looked down at her. A child's face does not lie. Emma had been holding this hope somewhere deep for 95 days, and she had let it out today for the first time. Yes, baby. Really. They reached the terrace at 3:12. The pigeons were not there. The arch was. The stone bench under the left column, where Isabella had said she would be, was empty. Claire's pulse pushed up into her throat. She kept Emma's hand and walked slowly, casually, scanning the level below. No woman in a dark coat. No signal. No shadow. On the edge of the bench, a small mark caught her eye. A single stripe of red chalk, no longer than her thumb. The code she and Isabella had drawn on locker doors when they were 15. I am in danger. Run. Claire went cold. Across the river, at that exact minute, Lucas's phone buzzed. Adrian's voice was soft and almost friendly. Come alone to the old pier at the Red Hook docks, Lucas. 3:30. I have a new offer, one that includes answers about your wife. Lucas knew it was a trap the moment he heard the word alone. He went anyway. The Red Hook pier was gray and salt-stained and empty when Lucas stepped out of the SUV at 3:28. He brought Marco. He brought 5 men. He did not bring the illusion that anyone in this city still played by old rules. Adrian's black Escalade was parked 50 yards away under a rusted crane. A single figure leaned against the hood, hands in his coat pockets. Not Adrian, one of his lieutenants, a Croatian named Peter with a shaved skull and a bored mouth. Marco saw it a half-second before Lucas did. Sir, windows. 2nd floor of the warehouse, left side. A muzzle flash answered him before the sentence ended. The first bullet went through the shoulder of a man named Tony, who had been with Lucas for 11 years. Tony was dead before he hit the concrete. Lucas did not freeze. He did not duck for cover the way an ordinary man would. He pulled his weapon and moved sideways to put the engine block of the SUV between himself and the warehouse, while returning fire toward the window. Marco broke left. The 4 remaining men split 2 and 2 and laid down suppressing fire toward Petter. The pier became a storm of sound for 90 seconds. A bullet grazed Lucas's upper arm. He did not feel it until later. Marco took one through the meat of his thigh and kept walking as if it were nothing. Petar, the lieutenant against the escalade, went down on the 3rd exchange with a neat hole above his left eye. 3 of Adrian's shooters escaped through the warehouse's back alley. 5 of Lucas's men stayed on the pavement and did not get up again. Adrian himself had never come. The whole thing had been a measurement. A man pokes a wounded animal with a stick to see how much strength is still in its jaws. Adrian now had the answer. The animal still bit. Claire's hand shook so badly on the way back from Central Park, she had to sit on her own fingers to stop it. Emma watched her from across the cab seat. "Miss Claire, you are crying. The wind in the park, baby." "Why did we leave before seeing Mommy?" Claire forced her voice level. "Mommy could not come today. She sent a message. She is sorry. She will come another day." "When?" "Soon." It was the first real lie Claire had ever told a child. She felt it settle in her stomach like cold metal. She paid the cab driver 3 blocks from Dr. Feinberg's office and slipped back in through the side door with Emma 10 minutes before Dominic expected them. The receptionist did not meet her eyes. The receptionist had been paid, and had not been paid enough to ask questions. By the time Dominic bundled them both into the town car, Claire had stopped shaking on the outside. On the inside, she was pulling every thread she knew. The emergency number Isabella had given her was dead. The message drop at the Brooklyn dry cleaner came back empty. The burner phone Isabella had sworn she would answer day or night rang 4 times, and then went to a generic voicemail. Someone had her friend. Someone was holding her in a place without a phone, without a window, without a way to answer a red chalk mark on a stone bench. Lucas walked through his own front door at 7:15 that evening with his left arm in a sling, a fresh bandage showing white through a torn coat, and blood on his shirt that was not entirely his. Mrs. Eleanor saw him first, and crossed herself without meaning to. Sophia rushed forward with a glass and a doctor's number. He waved both away. He walked past them. He walked past the staircase. He walked straight into the study and slammed the door so hard, the frame of the family portrait on the wall shifted half an inch. Marco limped in after him. "Sir, the doctor is already on the way." "I do not care about the doctor. Sir, Adrian is going to die this month. I do not care what it costs. I do not care whose name goes on the bill. He is going to die. Say it back to me. He is going to die this month, sir." Dominic came to the study 20 minutes later. Claire heard his footsteps from the top of the stairs. She had put Emma to bed in her clothes, sung no lullaby, sat in the dark with her own back against the child's door. She could not hear what Dominic said. She did not need to. When she finally went down the stairs, Lucas was standing in the open doorway of the study, his good arm braced against the frame, watching her come. The rage in his eyes was not the rage from the pier. The pier had been a war. This was something else. "You lost your tail at the bookstore, Miss Whitman." "Sir, 90 seconds unaccounted for. Before you went to the doctor." She did not answer. He studied her the way a surgeon studies a dark spot on a scan. "Go to your room. Do not come out of it until I call for you." She climbed back up the stairs slowly. In the dark of her room, she sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her own hands. Lucas believed Adrian had killed Isabella. Lucas was now going to spend every breath until his last one putting Adrian in the ground. And while he was doing that, whoever actually had Isabella was going to finish her. Claire closed her eyes. The promise she had made to Isabella 20 years ago in an orphanage bunk bed pulled against the promise she had made 3 months ago on a Brooklyn floor. One of them was going to have to break. She made her choice. Tomorrow, she was going to tell him everything. Claire did not sleep. At 6 in the morning, she wrote a short note on a piece of hotel stationery left in the desk drawer and slipped it under the study door downstairs. "Sir, I need to speak with you. Without Marco. Without the cameras. Before anything else today. It concerns your wife." She went back to her room and waited. Henry knocked at 7:40. "The cellar, miss. He says bring nothing." The wine cellar under the Moretti house was cold, stone-walled, and older than the mansion above it. There were no cameras here. There were no microphones. Lucas's father had built this room specifically as a place to say what could not be said anywhere else in the family. Lucas was already waiting at the small wooden table in the center. His left arm was still in the sling. His eyes had not closed in the night. A single bottle of red was open in front of him. He was not drinking it. "Close the door, Miss Whitman." She closed it. "Sit." She sat. He did not offer her wine. He folded his good hand over the bandaged one and looked at her. You have 2 minutes. Use them carefully. She used one. She told him Isabella was alive. She told him the Brooklyn apartment. She told him the crash on the Hudson Parkway had been bought and staged. She told him the orphanage, and the 20 years, and the promise. She told him about the nightly whisper that had shaped his daughter into the one child in the world who would open the door to her. She stopped. Lucas did not move. For a full 15 seconds, nothing in the cellar moved except the small flame in the oil lamp on the table. Then the color left his face. All of it. A white that went past skin and into bone. And then, just as quickly, a red rose up into his neck and his jaw that Claire had only seen once before, on the night she first heard his voice through a vent. He stood up so fast the chair behind him hit the wall. You came into my house, sir. You took my daughter's hand. You sang my wife's song to her at night. You sat at my table, Miss Whitman, while my men were bleeding in warehouses, while I buried an empty coffin in the rain. Sir, please. His right hand moved. Not toward her. Toward the small of his back where, she knew from watching him for weeks, he kept a holster. The movement was half an inch. No more. But it was a half-inch a man makes when his body is already ahead of his choice. Claire stood. She kept the table between them, but she did not step back. You can shoot me in this cellar, and nobody in this house will ever ask what happened. I understand that. But if you do, the only person who knows the shape of Isabella's plan dies with me, and she dies the day after. She is missing, Lucas. Someone took her. Not Adrian. Someone who knew she was still alive. If you spend this month killing Kovac, you will bury her for real. His hand stopped. His chest rose once, very slowly, then fell, then rose again, and this time something in it cracked. She is alive. It was not a question. It was a man saying words out loud to test whether the floor was still under his feet. Claire nodded. As of a week ago, sir. I have not heard from her in 4 days. Yesterday at the park, she was supposed to meet me with Emma. She left a warning instead. Red chalk. It means she is in danger. It means run. The mask Lucas Moretti had worn since the funeral did not slip. It shattered. He sat back down in the chair so hard the old wood groaned. He pressed the heel of his good hand against his eyes. His shoulders shook exactly once. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet in a way it had never been in Claire's presence. She is alive. And she did not come to me. She loved you, sir. Then why? Because she loved Emma more than she loved anything in her life, including you. And she did not believe this world of yours could hold a child. He did not answer for a long time. When he finally lifted his face, his eyes were wet, but they were also clear. A man who had been standing in fog for 96 days had just seen a shoreline. If Adrian did not take her, he said slowly, then someone else has been watching her. For a long time. Long enough to know a plan only her closest friend knew. Yes, sir. Do you have any idea who? Claire swallowed. A suspicion. Not a name yet, an old one, from before she met you. Lucas stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, crossed the cellar, and did something Claire had not expected. He extended his good hand to her across the table. You have lied to me in my own house, Miss Whitman. I will decide later what to do about that. But today I have 2 enemies. Adrian is trying to finish me, and some ghost from my wife's past is trying to finish her. You know the ghost better than anyone alive, so you are going to help me find both. Claire looked at the offered hand. Then she took it. By noon that day, the Moretti house had a new architecture. The dining room, normally reserved for long Sunday meals with family captains, became a war room. Maps of 5 boroughs covered the table. Pin markers showed every warehouse, every restaurant, every dock Adrian had moved on. A second, smaller map was pinned to the side wall. That one showed only 3 dots. Brooklyn, the Hudson Parkway Bridge, Central Park. Isabella's map. Only 4 people were allowed in the room. Lucas, Marco, Claire. And, at Lucas's insistence, no one else. Not even Sophia. 2 fronts, Lucas said. He stood at the head of the table, coat off, sling off, a fresh white bandage just visible at the edge of his collar. Adrian is one, whoever has my wife is the other. We cannot drop either. If I pull back from Kovac tomorrow, Vincent and the other capos will walk out the front door and into his arms by the end of the week. If I do not find Isabella in days, she dies. Marco nodded once. Understood, sir. So we do both. Publicly, I am still at war with Adrian. We hit him tonight. Hard enough that he knows I still have teeth. Privately, Marco, you and a small team I trust begin to hunt. He turned to Claire. Everything you know about my wife's last 6 months. Every person she called. Every place she slept. Every secret she kept from me. Claire opened a small notebook she had been building in her head for months. The apartment above the bakery on Hicks Street. The dry cleaner 3 blocks east is her drop box. She had one burner phone, one number memorized. She never used the same cafe twice. She paid cash for everything but train tickets. There is a woman at the public library in Park Slope named Ingrid who helped her research the accident staging. And there is a man who was paid $80,000 in cash to make sure her car was found and she was not. Marco was writing fast. Name? She only called him the swimmer. Lucas hit Adrian at 9 that night. 2 casinos in Bensonhurst owned under a Kovac shell company. 4 teams, simultaneous. No one killed. Lucas had been specific about that. Burn the rooms. Scare the dealers. Let the money go to Ash and let the story spread. The message, the moment the first fire alarm rang, was not a sentence. It was a signature. I am not dead. By dawn, every capo in the family who had been reaching quietly for their phone to take Adrian's call put the phone back down. Vincent came to the house at 8 in the morning with a bottle of grappa and a silent nod. The family, for at least 1 more week, was still Lucas's. While Brooklyn smoked, Marco sat in a car outside the Brooklyn dry cleaner with a telephoto lens. He sat there for 11 hours. He watched. He logged. He pulled threads. The owner of the cleaner was clean. The delivery driver was clean. The accountant was clean. And then, at 4 in the afternoon, Marco ran Isabella's bank records one last time. Her personal account, the one Lucas had given her on their wedding day, showed a withdrawal 2 weeks before the bridge. $40,000, in cash, routed through a teller at a Chase branch on Lexington. Standard, for a woman running. But the sister account, the household account that paid the staff, showed something else. 2 days before Isabella vanished, someone had accessed that account from a terminal at the same Lexington branch and made a smaller withdrawal, $12,000. Signed for by Henry Caldwell, the butler, the man who had opened the door for Claire on her first day, the man who had walked her to the East Wing, the man who had been in the Moretti house for 19 years. Marco stared at the signature on the scanned slip for a long time. Then he called Lucas. While the 2 men began to untangle that thread, Claire sat on the carpet of Emma's bedroom with a box of crayons between them. Emma had been drawing in silence for 40 minutes. She had filled 3 pages. On the first, a house. On the second, a fox. On the third, she was still working. Show me, baby. Emma turned the page toward her. 3 figures. A tall man in a dark suit drawn in black. A small girl with brown braids holding a stuffed animal, drawn in pink. And between them, a woman in a gray dress, her hands reaching out to both. But in the background, behind the woman in gray, Emma had drawn something else. Another figure. A man. Not in a dark suit. Not shaped like her father at all. Taller. Thinner. Drawn in heavy black crayon. Standing behind the woman. Watching. Claire's hand went still on her knee. Who is that, baby? The man behind Mommy. Emma studied the drawing as if she too were only now seeing him. The one from the window, Emma said quietly. What window, baby? Our old house. He used to be across the street sometimes. Mommy said not to wave at him. Claire closed her eyes. The man behind Isabella was not Adrian Kovac. The man behind Isabella had been there long before Lucas ever met her. Lucas brought Henry into the wine cellar at 10 that night. The old butler had served the Moretti family since before Lucas's mother died. He walked down the stone steps with his hands clasped in front of him like a man going to church. Marco closed the door. Claire stood against the far wall. Sit, Henry. Yes, sir. $12,000. Lucas slid the withdrawal slip across the table. 2 days before my wife vanished. Your signature. I am only going to ask you once. Henry looked at the slip. Then his shoulders began to shake. Not in fear, but in the quiet collapse of a man who has carried a stone too long. He said he would kill my grandson, sir. Start at the beginning. 7 months ago. My grandson, Daniel. He is 22. He fell in with a crew up in Yonkers. A man came to me. He sat in my daughter's kitchen and told me he knew where Daniel was that night and what Daniel had touched. He said he could make it go to a prosecutor or make it go away. The price was small. Only information. What information? Her. Mrs. Isabella. Her schedule. Who visited. When she would be in the city alone. Lucas's hand curled on the table. He did not interrupt. I told myself he was only a newspaperman, sir. Only 3 weeks later, when I saw how much he already knew, did I understand what I had done. Adrian Kovac. Henry shook his head. No, sir. I know Kovac's men. It was not any of them. This man was different. Taller. Lean. A voice from the northeast. Boston, maybe. Educated. He spoke about your wife the way a professor speaks about a book he has read many times. He knew things I did not know, sir. A dormitory fire at her college. A painting she made when she was 20. An ex-fiancé she never mentioned in this house. Claire's back pressed flat against the cold stone. Ethan. She did not say the name aloud. Not yet. Lucas spoke with no heat at all, which was the most dangerous way he spoke. Henry. You sold my wife to a man whose name you did not even ask. If Emma were not attached to you, you would be in a river by midnight. Go to your room. Pack one bag. 2 of my men will sit on your daughter's corner until I decide what to do with you. Yes, sir. At the foot of the stairs, Henry did not turn around. She was kind to me, sir. Every morning for 9 years. I will carry what I did until I die. Then he climbed the stairs. The package was at the gate when Marco went to leave. No sender. No note. Wrapped in brown paper. Cold enough to mean it had been in ice. Marco carried it to the kitchen and cut the string himself. Inside was a man's hand. A faded tattoo of a rose across the thumb. A tattoo Marco recognized because he had bought the man who wore it a drink on his 40th birthday. A typed card sat on top. Stand down or more of them come back in pieces. Kovac. Mrs. Eleanor walked in at the wrong moment and turned quietly to the sink. Lucas stared at the box for a long time. Then he crossed the kitchen to where Claire stood frozen in the doorway, and without a word he took her hand in his. It was the first time he had touched her. His palm was hot. Hers was ice. You and Emma do not leave this house, he said quietly. Not for the doctor, not for air. The man in Henry's story is not Adrian. Adrian is the smaller danger now, and the other one is somewhere close enough to mail this to me. Claire did not sleep. She sat by her window with the curtain open an inch, and let her mind walk backward down a long hall of years. A dormitory at Yale, 16 years ago. A hallway she had walked with Isabella more times than she could count. A thin young man in a dark coat who waited outside their wing long after the relationship had ended. A note on Isabella's dresser, folded small, that had said only you are going to regret leaving me. Ethan Vance, age 20 at the time, poetry student, high cheekbones, eyes that did not blink often enough. Claire had not thought about him in 12 years. She had a feeling, cold and certain, that he had thought about Isabella every single day. Claire was halfway through the Velveteen Rabbit when the alarm went. Emma had just begun to close her eyes. Her hand had loosened around the fox. Then the house screamed. 3 tones of klaxon through every wall. A red light spun above the east wing door. A gunshot cracked through glass downstairs. Emma's eyes flew open. Claire did not speak. She moved. She scooped the child out of the bed, crossed the room in 4 steps, and pushed them both inside the cedar wardrobe. She pulled the door closed until only an inch of air remained. Do not make a sound, baby. No matter what you hear. Emma nodded against her chest. Downstairs, the library windows exploded inward. 4 men in black tactical gear came through the glass. 4 more hit the kitchen door at the same second. 2 more came over the east garden wall. 10 shooters. Radios murmuring in Croatian. Adrian had not wanted another measurement. This was the kill. Lucas was still in the study. He heard the first shot from the kitchen and was moving before the second. Marco came through the hallway door with a shotgun and a face that had been waiting for this night since the funeral. They did not speak. They walked into a war. The fighting lasted 7 minutes. It ended in the front hall under the chandelier Isabella had picked out. 2 Kovac shooters surrendered on the marble. The rest did not. 3 Moretti men were bleeding but alive. 6 Kovac men were not. Marco put his knee on the back of the tallest survivor. Who sent you? Kovac. Who else? Why tonight? The boss said the house is broken. Wife dead. Daughter locked inside. Easy night. Lucas crouched slowly in front of the man. Who told your boss my wife was dead? Everyone knows that. She drowned. Has anyone ever told him different? No, boss. Someone else, though. Not us. Somebody told our guy in Queens. 2 weeks ago. Said the wife is walking around. Adrian laughed. Said if she was walking around, we would have seen her. Lucas did not move for a long moment. Then he stood. Lock them in the cellar. Because now he knew. Adrian had not taken Isabella. Adrian had no idea she was still breathing. Someone else had whispered it in the dark, just loud enough for Kovac's men to hear. Someone who wanted Lucas and Adrian tearing each other apart while he kept her quietly somewhere else. Upstairs, Lucas took the hallway 3 steps at a time. Emma, Claire. The bedroom door was open. The bed was empty. The book lay face down on the floor. A small sound came from inside the wardrobe. Not a cry. A breath. Lucas pulled the door open slowly. His hands were shaking. His hands never shook. Inside, Claire was curled on the floor with Emma pressed against her chest. Her arms were wrapped completely around the child. Her body was between Emma and the door. Lucas went down onto one knee. The words that came out of him were not a boss's words. "Are you all right?" Claire looked up. Plaster dust sat on his shoulder. "We are all right." He reached one hand into the wardrobe. Emma took it first. Claire, after a small hesitation, took the second. He lifted them both out at the same time. At 3 a.m, after the police had been paid off, the bodies moved, and Emma put down to sleep in Lucas's own bed with Mrs. Eleanor beside her. Lucas and Claire sat across from each other in the study. He poured 2 small glasses of whiskey. He slid one across to her. "Adrian did not take my wife, Miss Whitman." "No, sir. Someone told Adrian's people, 2 weeks ago, that she was still alive. Someone who wants Adrian and me pulling each other apart while he holds her quietly somewhere else." "Yes, sir." Lucas set his glass down. "Who else could possibly know my wife was alive?" Claire closed her eyes. She took a slow breath in, and a slower one out. "I have a name, sir." Claire had given a name at 3 a.m, but Lucas had not let her finish the story. "Tomorrow," he had said, closing his hand briefly over hers across the desk. "Tell me everything you remember about him tomorrow. Tonight neither of us is thinking clearly, and the name you are about to give me deserves to be heard by a clear man." That had been 6 hours ago. Now it was 10 a.m, and Emma had school. The private academy on East 93rd had been chosen by Isabella herself. 12-foot walls, guards at the gate who had once served in the Israeli army. A single road in, a single road out. Lucas had wanted to cancel the day. Emma had shaken her head against his shoulder and whispered, "I want to go, Daddy," which was more words in a row than she had given him in 3 months. He could not say no to a sentence that long. The compromise was that Claire rode with her in the back of an armored SUV, with 2 lead cars and 1 chase car, 4 men in each. Marco himself took the front passenger seat of their vehicle. They pulled out of the Greenwich Gate at 9:42. It happened on a quiet 2-lane stretch between Rye and Portchester, a place where the road narrowed, and tall hedges closed in on both sides, and one could not see what was around the next bend. A garbage truck had jackknifed across both lanes. The lead SUV braked. The chase car behind Claire's vehicle braked. For a single half-second, everything stopped. Then the hedges moved. 6 men came out of the left hedge. 4 more from the right. They did not wear masks. They did not wear matching clothes. They wore winter jackets in different colors, and jeans, and work boots, and could have been any group of tradesmen in America. But they moved the way men move when they have rehearsed a particular hallway 100 times. They also did not shout. Kovac's men, Claire would later remember, had shouted. Adrian's men announced themselves with their voices because their brand required fear. These men made no sound at all. The first shot took out the driver of the lead vehicle through the windshield. The second took out the engine block of the chase car. Their SUV was now a box. Marco threw himself across the center console toward Claire and Emma in the back. Down, down. The rear door on Claire's side opened by a method she did not see. A man reached in, hit Marco once in the temple with something metal, and reached past him for the child. Claire did not think. She put her body between the man and Emma. She clawed. She bit. She got her nails into the skin under his jaw hard enough to pull blood. She was not a fighter. She had never hit another human being in her life. It did not matter. For 15 seconds, she was the only thing between this stranger and the child she had promised a dying friend she would protect. The second man came in from the other side. He did not bother with Claire. He hit her across the temple with the butt of a pistol. The last thing she saw before the light went out was Emma being lifted into the air with her stuffed fox still clutched in one small fist. She woke 11 minutes later on the road beside the SUV, her face against cold asphalt. Marco was on his knees next to her, one hand pressed to the side of his own bleeding head, the other holding a phone to her ear. "She is waking up, sir. Sir, she is breathing." "Claire," Lucas's voice. Not the boss's voice, a voice stripped of everything. "They took her," Claire whispered into the phone. "I tried. I could not stop them. Lucas, they took her. I am coming." He had been in the dining room at the time, flanked by 7 capos, pointing at a map of Bensonhurst and explaining the final piece of a plan to cut Adrian Kovac in half before the week was out. When the call came, He stood up without a word and walked toward the door. Vincent's voice caught him before he reached it. "Lucas, sit down. My daughter has been taken. Kovac is striking every night. If we do not finish him this week, there is no family left to come home to. You walk out that door and every man at this table remembers it." Lucas stopped. He turned. He looked at the old capo who had known him since he was a child. "Emma is everything I have left in this world, Vincent. If I do not go, I am not a man any of you should want to follow anyway." He walked out. He reached the roadside 32 minutes later. Claire was sitting on the curb with a first aid cloth pressed to her temple. Dried blood had run down the side of her jaw and into her collar. Her hands were still shaking. Lucas dropped to his knees in front of her on the cold pavement. "This is not your fault. I could not hold him. Nobody could. Look at me." She did. "We are going to find her." He pulled her forward. Not a hug, not exactly, but his forehead against hers, and for 3 seconds he just breathed. Then his phone rang. Not Marco's phone. His. The number was blocked. He pressed the speaker. A video played. 30 seconds long. Emma on a wooden chair, wrists tied. The fox still somehow clutched under one arm. Silent tears running down her cheeks. The voice over the video was machine scrambled into something inhuman. 48 hours. Hand over the Brooklyn docks to Adrian Kovac publicly, or I send her back to you in the same condition I sent the hand. The video ended. Lucas's voice was very quiet. "Adrian." Claire grabbed the phone from him and pressed play again. She watched the screen. Not Emma this time, but the background. A painting, half cut off by the frame of the shot, hung on a brick wall behind the chair. A painting of a woman by a river. Oils. The style unmistakable. Claire knew that painting. She had watched Isabella make it in a dorm room 16 years ago. It was a gift Isabella had once given to a boy she later tried very hard to forget. Claire looked up at Lucas. Her lips were white. "Not Adrian," she whispered. "I know who took her, and I think he is the one holding your wife." They drove to the mansion in silence. Claire held the phone on her lap with the video frozen on the painting. Lucas did not take his eyes off the road. In the study, Claire spoke for 9 minutes without stopping. Ethan Vance, Yale, sophomore year, the boy with the perfect grades and the dark coat. He was already unraveling by the time Isabella met him in a poetry seminar. She left him after 18 months because he began to read her journals. He left her a note on her dorm door, a second on her windshield. The last one said, "I will wait as long as I have to." Isabella changed her number, changed her apartment, met Lucas Moretti at a charity dinner 7 years later. She never said Ethan's name in this house. Claire had believed for a long time that Isabella had let him go. Isabella had not. She had been feeling his shadow for 16 years. Lucas listened without interrupting. When she finished, he turned to Marco. "Find him. I want to know where he sleeps before noon." Marco was already on the phone. The file came back at 1. Ethan Vance, age 36. No arrests, no wife, no visible employer. A small weapons trafficking operation running under 3 shell companies, none of which would have survived a close look by any federal agency that bothered. Small enough to stay invisible. Skilled enough to build a crew that had taken Emma off a protected road in 11 minutes without a sound. "He is not street," Marco said. "He is not mafia. He is worse. He is patient." Lucas looked at the photograph. Thin face, pale eyes, a smile that looked practiced alone in a mirror. "If I move on this man tonight, Adrian knows within an hour I am not looking at him anymore. Adrian finishes me before dawn. By Monday there is no Moretti name in this city." The silence in the room agreed. Marco spoke first, without looking up. "Sir, let me take Adrian. You go find your daughter and your wife. No, this family is mine. Both wars are mine." Claire stepped forward and placed her palm flat on the weapons file. "You do not have to choose between the 2 wars. You can use one against the other." Both men turned. "Adrian has been trying to make you look weak for months. Let him think he succeeded. Send him a message tonight. Tell him you have lost the will to fight. Offer him a meeting somewhere public, somewhere he cannot refuse. The plaza, 24 hours from now, face to face. He will think it is a trap. He will think it is a trap and come anyway, because he cannot stand not to watch you break. And for the 24 hours his attention is on the meeting. His men are not on your warehouses. Marco's best team has a full day to find Emma and Isabella." Lucas studied her. "Where did you learn to think this way, Miss Whitman?" I sat in the back of a Brooklyn apartment with a frightened woman for 6 months while she mapped every way to disappear from you. She learned to think this way. I watched. Lucas was silent. Then he picked up his phone. Marco, draft the message to Adrian. Tonight, from me personally, the plaza. Tomorrow at noon. I come with one man and a woman who carries my papers. No security. Public room. Yes, sir. And the search team. Best 6. They fly the moment the message is sent. Yes, sir. Lucas set the phone down. For the first time all day, the muscle along his jaw loosened by a 1/4 inch. After Marco left, Lucas walked to the window. Claire stood in the center of the room and watched him look at the winter garden. He has been waiting for this, Lucas said quietly. Ethan, he must have known about the plan weeks before it happened. He must have seen my wife coming out of that apartment and known she was not going to die on that bridge. He let her stage it for him. He watched her walk into the trap she built with her own hands. Claire closed her eyes, and he waited for the right moment. A moment when you were already at war. A moment when the whole city would look at Adrian and not at him. Yes. We handed it to him. Lucas turned from the window. His face was very still. Then we take it back. The search team found the factory at 4 a.m. It was a defunct paper mill, an hour south of Newark. Long closed, owned by a shell company registered in Delaware to a name that traced, through 7 layers, back to a man in Boston named Ethan Vance. A drone Marco sent at 3:15 had caught what mattered. 1 armed guard at each corner of the main building, 2 vehicles in the lot, a single window, on the 2nd floor, glowing yellow long after the rest of the building had gone dark. Someone in that room was still awake. 2 someones, if the odds held. The plan came together in the dining room at 4:40. Marco would lead a 6-man team in 2 unmarked vans. They would cut the power to the mill at 11:45 in the morning, 10 minutes before Lucas was due to sit down across from Adrian at the plaza. They would breach through the south loading door, which Marco had studied on a satellite map until he could draw it with his eyes closed. They had until whatever moment Adrian's patience ran out. They did not know how many minutes that would be. Lucas would go to Adrian with 1 man and a small, quiet woman carrying a folder. Claire put her hand on the dining room table. No, I am going with Marco. Emma needs to see a face she knows when that door opens. Miss Whitman. Lucas. It was the first time she had said his first name in front of anyone. The room noticed. She has been tied to a chair for a day, Claire said quietly. When the door comes in, she will not know whether it is rescue or worse. I cannot let the first person she sees be a stranger with a gun. Lucas watched her for a long moment. Adrian is a man who can smell a lie from across a room, he said finally. I cannot sit across from him alone. The moment I sit down without someone beside me, he knows the meeting is fake, and he pulls a trigger. He needs to see a woman with a folder, a woman he has never met, a woman who belongs nowhere in my family that he can trace, a woman who makes him curious enough to wait. You are asking me to be bait. I am asking you to be the only person in that room Adrian cannot read. Claire closed her eyes. She could feel Marco watching her from the other end of the table. She could feel Sophia, who had come in silently with coffee a minute ago and not yet left, standing behind her. I want your word, Claire said. Marco's team does not leave the mill without my girl. You have my word. Our girl. Lucas did not blink. Our girl. At 10 a.m, Lucas brought Claire into the small shooting range in the basement. It was a narrow corridor with a target and a table. He set a compact pistol on the table between them. This is a Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 380. 6 rounds. No safety to switch. Double action. It will sit in the inside pocket of your jacket, and it will not print. Lucas, pick it up. She picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the wool of his coat against her shoulder blade, and guided her hands, both hands on the grip, feet apart. Do not close your eyes when you squeeze. Do not aim at the chest of a man in a suit. Go for the stomach. A man with a stomach wound does not chase you. She fired once. The sound was small and ugly and shocked her wrists. Again, she fired twice more. If everything goes wrong in that room, Lucas said quietly at her ear, you do not try to save me. You put 2 rounds into Adrian before any of his men understand what is happening, and you run for the service stairs on the east side. Do you hear me? I hear you. He turned her to face him. They did not touch. Their eyes met. It was not love. It was something that lived in the same country as love. It was the weight of 2 people discovering, at the same instant, that they were holding each other's names in their hands, and neither of them had put those names down. Tell me you understand, he said. I understand. He took his hand off the gun and stepped back. In the upstairs room of the paper mill, Ethan Vance stood at the window. The sky above New Jersey was the flat gray color that came before snow. Down the hallway, a man's footsteps paced past the door of the room where Emma had slept. Down the hallway in the other direction, behind a second locked door, his other prize had not slept at all. He walked there now. He unlocked the door. He stepped inside. Isabella Moretti sat against the far wall with her wrists bound in front of her. She was thinner than he had imagined. Her eyes were hollow. Her hair had come loose from its tie. She was still, to him, the most beautiful woman who had ever walked past him in a hallway. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her, close enough that she could have spat in his face. She did not. She looked through him as if he were a pane of glass. You see now, Bella? He said softly. Your husband cannot even find you. He is sitting in a hotel today trading pieces of a waterfront to a man who hates him. He has forgotten you already. You were not a wife to him. You were a trophy. I am the only one who has ever remembered you. She did not answer. He reached up and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. She flinched. 2 clocks, 3 states apart, were now counting down the same hour. The private suite on the 14th floor had been booked under the name of a shell law firm that had not existed the day before. Lucas stepped out of the elevator at 11:56 with a single bodyguard beside him, a quiet man named Russo, and Claire at his other shoulder. Claire wore a dark blue coat over a plain black dress, a leather folder under one arm. The pistol rode against her ribs and did not show. 2 of Adrian's men stood outside the suite. They patted Russo down thoroughly. They patted the folder. They did not pat Claire. She had counted on that. Adrian Kovac, like most men of his kind, did not imagine that the danger in a room could be wearing a woman's clothes. The door opened. She walked in second. Adrian was already seated at the long oak table in the center of the room, a bottle of Brunello open in front of him, and an expression on his face that Claire would remember for the rest of her life. He was smiling the way a man smiles at a funeral he has planned. Lucas. At last. Lucas sat across from him. He did not take off his coat. Russo stood 2 paces behind him. Claire took the chair at Lucas's left and placed the folder on the table. Your assistant? Adrian said. His eyes moved over Claire once. My lawyer's clerk. Quiet type. I like that in a woman. Claire did not look up. Lucas spoke first, voice low and tired, the voice of a man who had not slept in days and wanted it to be heard. Name your terms, Adrian. I am done. Adrian's smile widened. He had waited years for that sentence. He reached under the table, produced a single sheet of paper, and slid it across. The Brooklyn docks, in full, 40% of the Long Island casino, a public press release before the end of the week, a handshake where the capos can see it. Lucas read the paper slowly. He said nothing. Claire did not watch the paper. She watched Adrian, his hands, his throat, the small movement of his right sleeve. He had not stopped looking at his watch. 3 times in 90 seconds. A man ready to receive a message. Claire reached, very slightly, under the table and brushed her knee against Lucas's. He felt it. He did not react. He took out the silver pen Isabella had given him for their 10th anniversary and rolled it once between his fingers. The gesture was nothing. It was also the signal that Marco had been waiting for on the other end of a radio 3 blocks away. Adrian watched the pen. Then Adrian began to laugh. It was a soft, almost warm laugh. A laugh of a man who had been playing a longer game than everyone in the room had assumed. Lucas, you disappoint me. Lucas set the pen down. You thought I did not know, Adrian said. You thought the news that your daughter was taken off a road in Westchester yesterday did not reach my kitchen by dinner. You thought I would believe that you, of all men, would sign away your father's docs while a stranger holds your child in a room somewhere. I knew the moment your message arrived. I came to watch the performance. His hand moved toward his jacket. Lucas's hand moved a quarter second earlier. Now, Lucas said quietly, without raising his voice at all. 4 doors opened at once. The door to the adjoining suite, through which 4 of Lucas's men came at a full run. The service door by the minibar, through which 3 more came. The main door, which slammed shut behind 2 of Adrian's guards, who turned to find a shotgun waiting for them on the other side. And the curtain at the window, which billowed as a sniper's red dot, settled exactly on the center of Adrian's chest. The gunfire lasted 11 seconds. Claire was already on the floor. Lucas had pushed her sideways off her chair the instant his hand left the pen, and she had gone down with the reflex of a woman who had practiced falling in a basement at 10 in the morning. She did not fire. She did not need to. the room filled with the sound of glass and suppressed rounds. And when it stopped, 8 of Adrian's men lay on the carpet, and Adrian was on his knees with Russo's knee in his spine and his wrists zipped behind his back. Lucas walked around the table slowly. He crouched in front of Adrian and took his jaw in one hand. "You killed 5 of my men at the pier. You burned 20 million in Newark. You sent me a hand in a box. You tried to take my house in the middle of the night." Adrian's nose was bleeding. He was still smiling. "And yet I am breathing, Moretti. You have gone soft." "No." Lucas leaned closer. "You are breathing because a bullet would be a gift. You are going to live in a box built by the United States government. You are going to read newspapers about me for the rest of your life. You are going to watch me take back every street you took, every dock, every casino, and you are going to die slowly in a room with a number on the door." He let go. He stood. Russo lifted Adrian to his feet and walked him past the broken furniture toward the service hallway. Lucas turned to Claire. She was already standing, a small cut on her cheek from a splinter of table wood. The folder still pressed against her side. "You are fine?" "I am fine." His phone buzzed against his chest. He pulled it out. A single message from Marco. "Mill is ours. Emma is safe." Repeat. "Emma is safe." Lucas closed his eyes for 1 second. His whole face moved. Then the phone buzzed a second time. "Sir, Isabella is not here." The helicopter landed on the cracked asphalt lot beside the paper mill at 1:48 in the afternoon. Lucas was out of the door before the blades had finished slowing. Claire came after him, the folder gone, the pistol still in her coat. Snow had started to fall in thin, crooked lines over the New Jersey wasteland. Marco was waiting in the loading door frame with his sleeve torn and a line of blood drying along his temple. He did not speak when he saw them. He only stepped aside. Emma was sitting on a folded blanket in what had once been an office. Her wrists had been unbound. Someone, probably Marco himself, had wrapped her in an oversized tactical jacket. The fox was tucked under her arm, and her eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, were fixed on the door. When the door opened and she saw Claire, she made a sound Lucas had not heard from her in 100 days. She cried out, a single word, broken in half by the sob riding over it. "Claire." She did not stand. She could not yet. She held up both arms. Claire crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt, and gathered the child against her chest so hard that for a long second neither of them could breathe. Emma's small body shook. Her hands knotted into the back of Claire's coat. The fox fell into Claire's lap and stayed there. Lucas stopped in the doorway. He did not move forward. He watched. He would remember, later, for the rest of his life, the exact way his daughter had reached for a woman who was not her mother, and held on the way a drowning child holds a rope. And he would remember, in the same breath, the exact way Claire had caught her. He blinked once, and came the rest of the way in, and knelt beside them both, and put his hand on the back of Emma's small head, and finally let the breath out that had been in his lungs since 10 in the morning. A Moretti man named Cole came down the metal staircase from the 2nd floor a minute later. "Sir, upstairs. You should see it." Lucas went. The room at the end of the hallway had a single chair in it, a thin blanket on the floor, and a rope cut cleanly with a knife that was still there on the concrete. A half-empty glass of water. A plate of bread that had gone hard. The smell of a woman who had been kept in one room for too many days. Isabella had been here. 20, maybe 30 minutes before Marco's team had come through the loading door. Ethan Vance had heard something. A phone call. A radio. A quiet word from the one man he had posted at the front gate. The news of Adrian's capture had come and come out Manhattan faster than a man in a car could outrun it, and Ethan, who was patient above all else, had not stayed to be taken. He had cut her ropes where her wrists were. He had put her in a second vehicle. He had disappeared into the storm, beginning to whiten the highway. Lucas stood in the center of the cold room and did not curse. He did not hit the wall. He did not do any of the things his men were braced to see him do. He went very still. Downstairs, Claire had sat Emma on the blanket and was wrapping the jacket tighter around her. "Baby," Claire said quietly, "I need you to listen to me for 1 minute." Emma nodded against her shoulder. "Mommy is not here. The bad man took her somewhere else. Mama Claire is going to go and bring her home." Emma pulled back an inch. Her small face went pale. "Can I come?" "No, baby. I need you to go back to the house with Mrs. Eleanor and wait for us. I need you to be very brave for me the way you were brave today. But I want you to stay." Claire closed her eyes. She pressed her forehead against Emma's. "I am coming back, baby, with your mother. I promise." There was a pause. Then Emma, very quietly, very clearly, said the words that froze Lucas Moretti halfway down the metal staircase behind them. "Okay, Mama Claire." The syllable sat in the cold air of the factory for a long moment before anyone moved. Lucas came the rest of the way down the stairs. On the loading dock, while Cole carried Emma toward the car that would drive her back to Greenwich, Claire opened the small box that had been left on the blanket beside the child. The box of drawing supplies Ethan had given Emma to keep her quiet. A sketchbook, 4 crayons, a worn stuffed rabbit. At the bottom of the box, folded smaller than a nickel and tucked beneath the paper lining, Claire found a single slip of notepaper in Isabella's handwriting. She had managed to write it while Emma slept. St. Mary's Harbor, Nova Scotia. If anything happens to me, come find me there. Claire read it twice. Her eyes burned. Lucas came up behind her and read it over her shoulder. What is that place? It is where she and I agreed to meet, at the very end. A small fishing town. A house by the water. Only the 2 of us knew. Then he knows too. He has known everything else she ever told me. Yes. Lucas turned to Marco, who was already on the phone. The plane. Tonight. All 3 of us. Wheels up in 2 hours. Marco nodded. Claire looked once over her shoulder at the retreating form of the small girl being carried to the waiting car, and then she followed Lucas toward the second helicopter. The snow over New Jersey was coming down thicker now. Somewhere north, a man in a car was driving toward an ocean, with a woman he had waited 16 years to take home. St. Mary's Harbor sat on the southern edge of Nova Scotia. 90 houses spread along a cove that froze at the edges in winter. Boats in the small marina had been pulled onto blocks for the season. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys. The snow had stopped, but everything it had left behind was blue and hard. The plane had landed at Yarmouth. The truck Marco arranged had driven them the last 2 hours on roads that nobody else was driving at 5 in the morning. They killed the headlights a quarter-mile out from the cove and covered the last stretch on foot. The cabin Isabella had chosen 2 decades ago, before she was anyone's wife, sat on a bluff above the water. A second cabin, newer, rented under a false name 3 days earlier, sat at the far end of the same gravel lane. Light burned in the window of the second cabin. Lucas went first. Marco went second. Claire went third. They did not speak on the approach. They had worked out the angles in the truck. Lucas would take the front door. Marco would cover the west window and the only exit toward the dock. Claire had been told, twice, firmly, to stay behind the ridge and not come down until Lucas radioed. She came down anyway. She was not going to let the last line of this story be written without her in it. Ethan was in the kitchen. Claire saw him first through the side window, a dark form crossing between a coat rack and a duffel bag on the table. He was packing. Quickly. Methodically. The way a man packs who has heard news he did not want to hear and has about 20 minutes to be gone. Isabella sat on a wooden chair by the cold stove. Her wrists were bound in front of her with a length of climbing cord. Her head was bowed. Her shoulders rose and fell at a rate that said she was still breathing, and not much more. Claire ducked low under the window and circled to the back of the cabin. Lucas kicked the front door. The first shot from inside shattered a lantern on the front porch and took a chip out of the door frame beside Lucas's head. The second came from the kitchen. Marco returned fire through the west window. Ethan, who was better with a weapon than any poetry student should have been, dropped behind the butcher block island and came back up with one arm wrapped around Isabella's chest. He used her as a wall. "Stay back," he said. His voice was not raised. It was calm, which was worse. "Moretti, step into the kitchen and she goes first. I have nothing left to lose and neither of us believes you will risk her." Lucas stopped at the threshold. Isabella lifted her head. Her eyes found Lucas's across the kitchen for the first time in 104 days. "Lucas," she whispered. Her voice was thin, cracked at the edges. "I am so sorry." Lucas did not answer. He could not. His mouth had stopped working the moment he heard her say his name. Ethan pressed the barrel of his pistol harder into Isabella's temple. "Put the gun on the floor, Moretti. Slow. Kick it to me. Then you walk backwards out of my kitchen and you let me have my boat. Your boat. Our boat." Ethan's free hand drifted to Isabella's hair almost tenderly. "Where you could never find her again." Isabella closed her eyes. Behind Ethan, the back door of the cabin opened an inch. Claire stepped inside in her socks. She had left her boots on the porch because boots are loud on old wood floors. Her right hand held the pistol Lucas had given her. Both hands on the grip. Feet apart. Do not close your eyes when you squeeze. She walked 3 steps into the kitchen before Ethan heard the shift of air behind him. By then, the barrel of her pistol was pressed against the soft place at the base of his skull. Let go of my best friend, Ethan. Ethan went very still. For a full beat, the only sound in the cabin was the faint ticking of a metal stove. Then Ethan laughed. A small laugh. Not frightened. Almost pleased. Claire, he said softly. Of course it is Claire. It has always been Claire. Every hallway, every apartment, every time I tried to go to her. You were always the one in the way Isabella moved. She drove her elbow backwards into Ethan's stomach with every pound of weight her thin frame could spend. Ethan folded at the waist. His arm loosened. Isabella pitched forward out of his grip and half ran, half stumbled toward the threshold where Lucas was already moving. Ethan tried to turn and bring the pistol back up. Lucas shot him in the thigh. Ethan went down onto one knee. Marco came through the broken window with his shotgun and put a boot against the wrist holding the pistol until the wrist went slack. He took the gun. He put a zip tie around both of Ethan's wrists behind his back. He said nothing. Marco never wasted words. Lucas caught Isabella as her knees gave out. They stayed like that for a long time. Him on the kitchen floor with both arms around her, her forehead pressed to his shoulder, her bound hands still held against her own chest. A low, broken sound coming out of her that was not crying and not speaking, but some mixture of both. Claire lowered the pistol. She set it gently on the butcher block island. She took one step back, then another. This was not her moment. She walked to the back door, stepped into her boots, and went out onto the small, snow-covered porch to breathe. Hours later, on the plane back to New York, with Ethan in a locked rear compartment and Marco on a silent phone with the FBI, Isabella sat across from Claire in the cabin. Her wrists were bandaged. Her hair had been washed by a stranger at the rental airport. Lucas was asleep in the seat beside her, his hand still closed loosely around hers. Isabella reached across the aisle with her free hand. She took Claire's fingers in her own. You saved us, she whispered. You kept my daughter alive. You brought my husband to my door. You put a gun to a ghost who has been chasing me since I was 19 years old. Claire could not speak. She only squeezed. But Claire, Isabella said quietly, her voice steadier now. There is something I need to tell you before we land. 6 months later. Spring had come to Greenwich quietly, the way spring comes to old houses that have survived a hard winter. The roses along the east wall were opening. The iron gate at the front of the driveway stood open more often than closed. The men in dark suits who had once lined the hallways had been reduced to 2 at the main entrance, and both of them smiled now when the mailman came. The Moretti mansion had learned how to breathe again. On the plane back from Nova Scotia, Isabella had said the words she had been carrying for 104 days. She could not come home. Not as a wife. Not inside this world. She loved Lucas. She had always loved Lucas. But she had spent 3 months in a locked room because a shadow from a life before him had found her. And she understood now that no walls, no men, no house with cameras at every corner was ever going to be tall enough to keep that kind of shadow away from her child. She wanted Emma to grow up in a place where the front door did not have to be armored. Lucas did not fight her. He had listened, and then he had nodded, and then he had pressed his forehead against hers the way he had done in the cold kitchen of the cabin. The divorce had been the quietest anyone in either family had ever seen. 3 weeks after that, Lucas had walked into the Southern District of New York with a briefcase full of documents, a lawyer on either side, and a deal already drafted. He had given the federal government Adrian Kovac, his shipping routes, his accounting, and a web of associates that stretched from Brooklyn to Rotterdam. In exchange, his own family's name was put to sleep on paper. Adrian was now beginning a sentence that would end in a casket. Ethan Vance had taken a life term in a facility outside Syracuse on charges of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and weapons trafficking. He would be 68 years old the first time he could apply for release. He would not apply. Isabella now lived in a small town an hour north of San Diego, under a name she had chosen for herself. She ran a bookstore. She came east twice a year to see Emma. The visits were careful, and full of laughter, and short. Lucas sold the dock holdings. He sold the casino interest. He kept the real estate firm his father had founded as a cover business 19 years earlier, and for the first time in its history, he turned it into what it had pretended to be, a real company. Honest buildings, honest tenants, all of it, he said once to Marco, for a small girl who had begun to sing in the mornings again. Claire had not gone home to Brooklyn. She had tried. She had packed her single suitcase twice. Both times, Emma had taken her by the hand and led her back up the stairs to the east wing, and both times Claire had unpacked and told herself it was only 1 more week. 1 more week became 6 months. Emma called her Mama Claire in the mornings, at breakfast, at bedtime, and in every drawing she made now. The drawings were not of 3 figures anymore. They were of 4. The mother in California in one corner, the father in his dark coat, the small girl with brown braids, and the woman in gray, always between them, always holding a hand. On a Thursday evening in April, Lucas and Claire stood together on the balcony off the second-floor library. Below them, in the garden, Emma was chasing the last fireflies of the dusk with Mrs. Eleanor watching from a bench. The stuffed fox, older and more crooked-eared than ever, sat on a stone wall nearby, retired for the evening. Lucas did not look at Claire when he spoke. I used to think strength meant being able to control everything. Every man, every street, every outcome. And now? Now I think strength is knowing who stays when everything falls apart. Claire smiled at the dark garden. Sometimes, she said softly, the one who stays is not the one you were waiting for. From the grass below, a voice cut through the spring air, high and bright and unbroken. Mama Claire, Daddy, come down, dinner is ready. The 2 adults on the balcony looked at each other, and then, without discussion, they turned and walked together toward the stairs. Through the windows of the Moretti house, from the gravel drive, you could see it clearly that evening. 3 figures sitting down to a table, a child between them. A warm, steady yellow light, the light of a house where someone is home. The lesson of this story is a quiet one. Family is not always the people who share our blood. Family is often the people who choose us, again and again, on the days no one is watching. Titles fall away, names on paper fall away. What stays is who was still there when the walls came down. Emma did not choose a mother because someone gave birth to her. She chose the woman who held her in a wardrobe. Lucas did not find peace by winning every war. He found it the day he looked up and realized that the woman beside him had already bled for his daughter and asked for nothing in return. In a world that measures worth by power and money, the most important wealth remains simple. It is the person who shows up, who stays, and who keeps showing up. If this story moved you, please take a moment to press the like button, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from, and subscribe to our channel so you will not miss the next emotional story we share with you. We would love to hear from you. Has someone ever stayed for you when others walked away? Or have you ever chosen to be the one who stayed for someone else? Share your feelings in the comments below, because the most beautiful part of every story is the moment we get to hear yours. To every one of you watching tonight, we wish you strong health, peaceful days, a warm home, and people around you who choose you the way Emma chose Claire. Thank you for spending this time with us. Goodbye for now, and we will see you again in the next video.